The massive Zephyrian ship Ethereal Whisper moved silently through the dark space near the edge of the Kepler 442 star system. Its silver hull gleamed under the distant starlight as it searched for new worlds and alien species to study. Captain Velthor stood on the bridge, his forearms crossed behind his back as he watched the scanning displays. "Captain, we have detected something unusual," called out Science Officer Kethel from her station. Her tentacles danced across the glowing controls as data flowed across the screens. "There is a ship drifting about 50,000 kilometers from our position." Velthar walked over to examine the readings. The unknown vessel appeared on the main display as a dark, angular shape against the stars. It looked nothing like the elegant ships of the Zephyrian Collective or any of the other advanced civilizations they had encountered. This ship was crude and blocky, built from basic metal alloys that any primitive species might use. "Interesting," Velthar muttered, studying the scan results. "What do we know about this vessel?" Kethel's eyes glowed as she processed the information. "It appears to be some kind of warship, but a very primitive one. The hull is made of simple iron and titanium. The engines are basic fusion drives, nothing more advanced than what we see from species that have just learned to travel between stars. There are approximately 300 life forms on board, all in some kind of sleep state." The captain nodded slowly. In his 200 years of service, he had encountered many failed colony ships and primitive vessels. Most were from species that had tried to reach the stars too early, before they had developed the proper technology. Their crews usually died in space or went into emergency sleep to survive until rescue came. "Are they alive?" asked Commander Veshka, who had joined them at the scanning station. "Yes, but barely," Kethel replied. "Their life signs are very weak. The ship appears to be running on emergency power only. I would estimate they have been drifting here for several months, maybe longer." Velthor examined the ship's design more carefully. It was ugly by Zephyrian standards, with sharp edges and brutal angles. There were no smooth curves or artistic elements that marked the ships of truly advanced civilizations. Everything about it screamed of a species that built for function over form, and crude function at that. "Have we seen this ship design before?" the captain asked. "No, Captain. This appears to be a completely unknown species. The ship's configuration does not match any vessel in our databases. The energy signatures are also unfamiliar, though they seem very basic." This was exactly the kind of discovery that the Collective lived for. They had spent thousands of years cataloging the galaxy's many species, studying their biology, their technology, and their cultures. Finding a new alien race was always exciting, especially one that appeared to be so primitive that they posed no threat. "What is their current status?" Velthor inquired. "The ship is completely silent. No communications, no active scanning, no movement. If I did not know better, I would say it was completely dead. But the life signs indicate that someone is still alive inside, just in some kind of deep sleep." The captain considered their options. Standard Zephyrian protocol required them to approach any unknown vessel with caution, but this ship clearly posed no danger. Its weapon systems, if it even had any, would be no match for their advanced technology. The Ethereal Whisper was a state-of-the-art exploration vessel with shields and weapons that could handle anything short of a full battle fleet. "Shall we attempt to communicate with them?" asked Veshka. "There is no point," Kethel replied. "They are clearly in emergency hibernation. Their communication systems show no activity. I doubt they would even be able to respond in their current state." Velthor walked around the bridge, thinking the discovery of a new species was always reported immediately to the Collective Council, but standard procedure required a full biological and technological assessment first. They needed to understand what they were dealing with before making contact. "What do you recommend, Captain?" Deshka asked. The captain stopped and looked at the image of the primitive ship on their main screen. It hung there in space like a dead thing, dark and lifeless. Whatever species had built it was clearly not advanced enough to be a threat, but they might have interesting biological characteristics or primitive technology that could be studied. We will board the vessel, Velthor decided. Prepare a standard, first contact team. Neural dampeners, specimen containers, and recording equipment. We need complete biological scans of the crew and a full assessment of their technology level. Should we revive them first? Theshka wondered. No, the captain said firmly. It will be easier to study them while they sleep. Once we have gathered all the information we need, we can decide whether to wake them or simply leave them to continue their journey. Kethel began preparing the boarding equipment while other crew members readied the shuttle. None of them suspected that their primitive discovery had been watching them for the past 3 hours, recording every scan, every communication, and every detail about their ship and crew. The Zephyrian boarding shuttle attached to the human ship with a soft metallic clang. 6 alien soldiers floated through the airlock, their bioweapons humming with blue energy. They wore protective suits that shimmered like oil on water, and their large eyes glowed softly in the dim light of the human vessel. Commander. The Shka led the team through the dark corridors of the ship. Everything looked primitive to his trained eyes. The walls were plain metal, the lighting was harsh and simple, and the air smelled of recycled oxygen and machine oil. This was clearly the work of a species that had barely learned to travel between stars. Remember, Theshka whispered to his team, these creatures are in emergency sleep. Our neural dampeners should keep them unconscious while we work. Take biological samples first, then scan their technology. The soldiers moved deeper into the ship, following their scanners toward the area where the life forms were detected. They expected to find sleeping aliens in primitive hibernation pods, helpless and unaware of their presence. Instead, red lights suddenly blazed to life throughout the ship. Loud alarms began blaring, and the sound of machinery coming online echoed through the corridors. The Zephyrians stopped in shock as they realized the ship was not as dead as they had thought. Warning, unauthorized boarding detected, announced a calm voice in perfect Zephyrian language. All crew to battle stations. Veshka grabbed his communicator. Captain, something is wrong. The ship is active, and they are speaking our language. Before Velter could respond, doors began opening throughout the ship. Humans emerged from what the Zephorians had thought were hibernation chambers, but which were actually advanced cryosleep pods designed for rapid awakening. The aliens watched in growing alarm as the primitive crew came to full alertness in a matter of seconds. Captain Lee Hyun stepped into the corridor, followed by his senior officers. He was a tall human with dark hair and calm eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Lieutenant Commander Park Soo moved to his left, her hand resting casually on what appeared to be a primitive projectile weapon. Chief Engineer Kim Don checked a handheld device that was somehow interfacing with the ship's systems. Despite the Zephyrians' assumption that such technology was beyond this species. Greetings, Captain Lee said in flawless Zephyrian. I am Captain Lee Yun of the United Earth Space Forces vessel Retribution. You are currently trespassing on a military vessel of the Terran Federation. Deshka raised his neural dampener, a weapon that had never failed to pacify any known species. Blue energy washed over the humans, designed to shut down their nervous systems and render them unconscious. The Zephyrians waited for the aliens to collapse. Nothing happened. The humans remained standing, alert, and if anything, they seemed more focused than before. Dr. Han Sol, the ship's medical officer, actually smiled as she watched the alien weapon discharge harmlessly around them. Interesting technology, she commented to her captain. Their neural dampeners are calibrated for standard galactic brain chemistry. Unfortunately for them, human neural pathways are quite different. Theshka tried his weapon again, increasing the power. Again, the humans showed no effect. One of his soldiers attempted to use a stun weapon, a device that should have dropped any creature instantly. The energy beam struck Chief Petty Officer Ru Jinwoo squarely in the chest. Rue looked down at the scorch mark on his uniform, then looked back at the alien soldier with an expression that made the Zephyrian take a step backward. Rude, he said simply. Captain Velthor's voice crackled through their communicators. Report. What is happening over there? Captain, Veshka replied, his voice tight with confusion. Their weapons are not working. The creatures are awake, and they know our language. How is this possible? Navigator Choi Min stepped forward, holding a small device that was clearly some kind of translation and communication system. Captain Velthor of the Zephyrian collective ship Ethereal Whisper, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the COM channel. This is Navigator Choi Min. We are transmitting on your secure command frequency, because we have been monitoring your communications for the past 4 hours. Silence fell over both ships. The implications of what she had just said slowly sank in. The humans had been awake and aware from the moment the Zephyrian ship had detected them. Everything the aliens thought they knew about this encounter was wrong. Captain Lee stepped closer to the boarding party, and the Zephyrians instinctively moved backward. There was something about the way the human moved, something predatory and confident that spoke of extensive combat training. You have 30 seconds to return to your shuttle and withdraw to a safe distance, Lee said calmly. This is the only warning you will receive. Impossible, Vishka muttered. You are primitives. Your ship is crude. Your technology is basic. How do you know our language? How are you resisting our weapons? Strategic Officer Yoon Jae consulted his handheld device. Captain, their ship is maintaining position at exactly 50,000 kilometers. Standard Zephyrian tactical doctrine for unknown vessel assessment. They are following protocols established approximately 200 years ago by Fleet Commander Kethmer during the third expansion period. The color drained from Veshka's face as he realized what the human was implying. Captain Lee checked his chronometer. 20 seconds remaining. The 30 seconds passed in tense silence. Captain Lee Haeyan watched the Zephyrian boarding party with calm patience, while his crew maintained their positions with military precision. When no movement came from the aliens, he nodded to his tactical officer, Ensign Kang. Please demonstrate our sincerity to Captain Velthor. Back on the Ethereal Whisper, Captain Velthor was about to order his weapons charged when every system on his ship suddenly went dark. Emergency lighting flickered on, casting eerie shadows across the bridge. His crew scrambled at their stations, trying to understand what had happened. Report, Velthor shouted. Captain, we have lost all primary systems. Science Officer Kethel called out, her tentacles dancing frantically over her controls. Engines, weapons, shields, communications, everything is offline. How is that possible? We were not fired upon. I am detecting a very sophisticated electronic attack, Kethel replied, her voice filled with disbelief. The human ship transmitted a virus directly into our computer systems. But Captain, this should be impossible. Our security protocols are the most advanced in the galaxy. On the primitive human ship, Engineer Kim Don closed her handheld computer with satisfaction. Their systems are completely shut down. Captain, they cannot move, fight, or call for help. Captain Lee activated his ship's communication system. His image appeared on the darkened bridge of the Zephyrian vessel, transmitted through their emergency backup systems that somehow the humans had left operational. Captain Velthor Lee said politely, I hope this demonstrates that your initial assessment of our capabilities may have been somewhat inaccurate. As he spoke, the human ship began to change. Hull plates that had appeared to be simple metal started sliding apart, revealing weapon systems that definitely did not belong on a primitive vessel. Gun ports opened along the sides, and missile launch tubes extended from hidden compartments. Energy readings that had shown basic fusion power suddenly spiked to levels that indicated antimatter reactors. By the ancestors, Velthor whispered. The ship was disguised. Not disguised, Captain Lee corrected. designed. Every piece of this vessel was carefully planned to appear less advanced than it actually is. The hull composition includes metals that give false readings to most scanning technologies. The weapons are retractable and shielded. Even our crew quarters were designed to look like primitive hibernation chambers. Dr. Han Sol stepped into view beside her captain. We have been studying Zephyrian scanning technology for over 90 years, Captain Velthar. We know exactly what readings your sensors expect to see from a primitive vessel, so we built a ship that would give you those readings. The Zephyrian captain felt his world shifting beneath him. How long have you known about us? Your people first passed through our solar system in the year 2157. Navigator Choi Min answered, consulting her records. A merchant vessel, called the Gentle Current, conducted what you thought was a secret survey of Earth. The crew believed they were undetected, but we had been monitoring space around our world for decades. We recorded every scan, every transmission, every piece of data you collected about us. Strategic Officer Yoon Jae pulled up a holographic display that showed the interior of a Zephyrian ship in perfect detail. Since then, we have observed 40 Zephyrian vessels, intercepted over 12,000 communications, and recovered technology from 3 crash sites in remote regions of space. We know your ship classifications, your tactical procedures, your weapons capabilities, and your social structure. Captain Lee walked closer to the communication pickup, and Velthar could see the confidence in the human's eyes. You see, Captain, your people made a critical mistake. You assumed that a species is either primitive enough to ignore or advanced enough to be cautious around. You never considered that a species might be advanced enough to hide their true capabilities while appearing primitive. That is impossible, Velthar protested. No species develops that kind of strategic thinking without first developing advanced technology. The two go together. Perhaps for most species, Lee agreed. But humans are different. We learn to hunt in groups before we learn to make fire. We learn to deceive our enemies before we learn to build cities. Strategic thinking is not something we developed after becoming advanced, Captain. It is the reason we became advanced in the first place. Lieutenant Commander Park Soo stepped forward. Every human child learns about patience, misdirection, and long-term planning before they learn mathematics. We do not see deception as dishonest, Captain. We see it as survival. The implications of what he was hearing hit Velthar like a physical blow. How many ships like this do you have? That would be telling, Captain Lee replied with a slight smile. But I will say this. The Retribution is not alone in this system. And this system is not the only place where humanity has been, preparing. As if summoned by his words, new contacts began appearing on the Zephyrian sensors. Ships that had been invisible moments before started decloaking around the ethereal whisper. They were all human vessels, all appearing primitive on the surface, but radiating the kind of power that suggested advanced military technology. You walked into a trap, Captain Velthar Lee said quietly. A trap that has been over a century in the making. Captain Velthar stared at his tactical display as more human ships appeared around his disabled vessel. What had seemed like empty space moments before now revealed itself to be a carefully prepared killing field. 6 human warships hung in the void like sleeping predators that had finally decided to show themselves. Captain, Science Officer, Kethel whispered, her voice trembling. I am reading massive energy signatures from all of their vessels. These are not primitive ships. The power levels are beyond anything in our databases. On the bridge of the Retribution, Captain Lee Hyun watched his tactical display with the calm expression of someone who had planned this moment for years. Each human ship was positioned exactly where it needed to be, covering every possible escape route from the system. Communications Officer Shin Nara, open a channel to the Zephyrian reinforcements, Lee ordered. Sir, what reinforcements? Nara asked, checking her sensors. The ones that will arrive in approximately 4 minutes, Lee replied. Captain Velter sent an automatic distress signal the moment he detected our ship. Standard Zephyrian protocol calls for immediate backup when encountering unknown vessels. As if summoned by his words, 12 Zephyrian warships dropped out, a faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. Captain Nekvar of the battlecruiser Dominant Force immediately began scanning the area, expecting to find a simple rescue operation. Instead, he found his scanning officer staring at readings. That made no sense. "Captain, the ethereal whisper is completely disabled," the officer reported, "and I am detecting multiple unknown vessels throughout the system. Their energy signatures are ... unusual." "Define unusual," Dekvar demanded. "Sir, if these readings are correct, each of those ships has enough firepower to destroy a battlecruiser." Dekvar laughed. "Impossible," Velthar reported, finding a primitive derelict. "How dangerous can one crude alien ship be?" His question was answered when the first human torpedo struck his shields. The weapon appeared to be a simple projectile, but it carried a warhead that punched through Zephyrian shield technology, like it was made of paper. Alarms began wailing throughout the battlecruiser as damage reports flooded in. "Return fire," Vekvar shouted. His weapons officer tried to target the human ships, but the targeting systems kept losing lock. The human vessels moved in ways that seemed to predict exactly where the Zephyrian weapons would fire, sliding out of the way at the last possible moment. "They know our targeting protocols," the weapons officer reported in amazement. "It is as if they can read our minds." On the human ship, U.S. Destiny, Commander Obina coordinated the battle with the efficiency of someone who had rehearsed this scenario hundreds of times. Her crew had studied Zephyrian tactics so thoroughly that they could predict enemy movements before the aliens even decided to make them. "All ships, execute Phoenix Pattern 7, she commanded. "Target their command vessels first, then their communications arrays." The human fleet moved like a single organism, each ship playing its part in a deadly dance that the Zephyrians could not follow. Torpedoes found their targets with surgical precision, striking exactly the weak points that human intelligence had identified years ago. Shield generators exploded, weapons arrays went dark, and communication systems failed in sequence. Captain Velther watched the battle from his disabled ship with growing horror. The human attacks were not random or desperate. Every shot was calculated, every movement planned. His reinforcements were being systematically destroyed by an enemy that seemed to know their every weakness. "How is this possible?" he transmitted to Captain Lee on an emergency channel. "How do you know so much about our ships?" "Because we have been preparing for this day since before you were born," Lee replied calmly. "Every Zephyrian vessel that passed through human-monitored space, every piece of technology we recovered, every communication we intercepted, all of it was studied and catalogued." Lieutenant Kong Suho looked up from his tactical station. "Captain, we are receiving surrender requests from 8 Zephorian vessels. 3 more are attempting to retreat." "Allow the retreating ships to escape," Lee ordered, "but disable their faster-than-light drives first. We want them to reach home eventually, but not too quickly." The battle was over in less than 20 minutes. The mighty Zephyrian fleet, which had entered the system expecting to rescue a simple exploration vessel, now found itself at the mercy of the species they had dismissed as primitive. Admiral Chen Myung appeared on the communication screens of every surviving Zephyrian ship. Her image was being transmitted from Earth itself, showing that humanity's reach extended far beyond this single system. "Captains of the Zephyrian Collective," she said in perfect Zephyrian, "I am Admiral Chen Myung of the United Earth Space Command. What you have witnessed today is the result of careful planning, spanning over 200 years. The surviving Zephyrian captains listened in stunned silence as the human admiral continued. "We have similar fleets positioned near 17 major Zephyrian trade routes and 12 of your colony worlds. Not to attack them, but to remind you that we have been watching and learning for a very long time. Captain Vekvar, his ship, drifting helplessly, with its engines destroyed, finally understood the magnitude of their mistake. They had not discovered a primitive species. They had been discovered by apex predators who had been patiently studying their prey for generations. 3 days after the battle, Captain Lee Hyun stood in the communications center of the Retribution, preparing to address the entire galaxy. The surviving Zephyrian ships floated nearby, their crews working to repair the damage from the encounter. Some had been allowed to keep their faster-than-light drives functional, while others would need to wait for rescue ships to arrive. "Are all galactic communication networks ready?" Lee asked Communications Officer Shin Nara. "Yes, Captain. We have access to every major communication system in known space. The message will reach over 300 civilizations simultaneously." Lee nodded and stepped in front of the recording device. Behind him, the bridge crew of the Retribution worked at their stations with the quiet efficiency that had impressed even their Zephyrian prisoners. The aliens had spent the past 3 days watching humans work, and their respect for human capabilities had grown considerably. "Citizens of the galaxy," Lee began, his voice being translated into dozens of languages as he spoke. "This is Captain Lee Hyun of the United Earth Space Command. Humanity formally announces its presence in galactic civilization. On 1,000 worlds, alien beings stopped what they were doing to listen to this unprecedented broadcast." News of the Zephyrian defeat had already begun to spread through unofficial channels, but this was the first time anyone had heard directly from the mysterious species that had accomplished the impossible. "For over 2 centuries, we have observed your civilizations from a distance. We have studied your technologies, learned your languages, and watched your interactions with each other. During this time, you believed Earth to be inhabited by a primitive species that had barely learned to leave their home planet." Admiral Chen Myung appeared on screens across the galaxy, speaking from the command center deep beneath Earth's surface. Behind her, displays showed star maps with hundreds of red dots marking human observation posts and hidden bases. "This belief was deliberately encouraged," she continued. "While you saw primitive radio signals and simple space exploration, you failed to notice our true activities. Every alien ship that passed through human space was carefully monitored. Every piece of discarded technology was recovered and studied. Every communication was intercepted and decoded." On the Zephyrian homeworld, the collective council watched the broadcast in stunned silence. Prime Minister Kolanash had convened an emergency session the moment news of the fleet's defeat had reached them. The implications were staggering. "How many ships do they have?" asked Defense Coordinator Velkris. "We do not know," replied Intelligence Chief Deshmer. "But based on what we have observed, they have been building a military force for at least a century while maintaining the appearance of peaceful exploration." The broadcast continued as Dr. Lim Haejin appeared, standing next to a massive construction project in the asteroid belt around Earth's sun. The structure was clearly a space station of enormous size, bristling with weapons and defensive systems. Humanity's expansion into space was not driven by curiosity alone, Dr. Lim explained. "We built these installations because we knew that, one day, contact with galactic civilization would be inevitable. We chose to be ready." Captain Lee's image returned to the screens. "To those civilizations who approach us with peaceful intentions, you will find humanity to be reasonable neighbors. We are willing to engage in trade, cultural exchange, and scientific cooperation. We have much to learn from the galaxy's older civilizations." His expression grew more serious. "However, to those who might consider humanity easy prey because of our late arrival on the galactic stage, I offer this demonstration as evidence of your error." The display showed footage from the recent battle, but from angles that revealed the true scope of human preparation. Hidden weapons platforms throughout the system had provided targeting data. Cloaked observation ships had monitored every move the Zephyrians made. The battle had been won before it even began, through superior intelligence and planning. The ships you encountered were not our entire fleet. Captain Lee continued. They were a single patrol group from one sector of human space. We have similar forces positioned throughout this region of the galaxy, and they have been in place for decades. On distant worlds, alien military leaders frantically checked their own star charts, wondering how many times human ships had passed undetected through their territory. Lieutenant Commander Park Soo appeared next to Captain Lee. The age of easy conquest is over. Humanity will not be the victim of species who believe that technological superiority alone determines the outcome of conflicts. We have proven that patience, planning, and strategic thinking can overcome any advantage. The broadcast concluded with a simple message that would be remembered across the galaxy for generations to come. We did not seek this confrontation, Captain Lee said, but we were prepared for it. We have been preparing for it since the day we first detected alien signals in our skies. Humanity takes its place among the stars, not as conquerors, but as a species that will not be conquered. As the transmission ended, similar scenes played out across human space. Derelict ships powered up near major trade routes. Hidden bases revealed themselves on the edges of unexplored systems. The galaxy suddenly realized that the species they had overlooked had been watching them all along. The balance of power had shifted forever. Humanity had played the longest game of all, and they had won it before anyone else even realized they were playing.